see my screen? Yes, good. Okay. Okay. So hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I hope your day is going well so far. My name is Ben Dancer, and I work at Mentor Canada as our Manager of Quality Mentoring and Capacity Building. And today I will be facilitating our fourth Visiting Expert Series conversation with Dr. Teena Starlight, focusing on creating culturally relevant and respectful mentoring opportunities for Indigenous youth. And Dr. Starlight, as many of you likely already know, is a highly respected and experienced expert in this area. And we are truly thrilled to host them as our fourth visiting expert during the incredibly important National Truth and Reconciliation Month. Before I start the presentation, I just wanted to bring your attention to a current national research project that we are conducting on the career mentoring experiences for racialized youth. And we're looking to understand the strategies, challenges, and successes of empowering racialized youth between the ages of 18 and 30, focused on their career development journeys through mentoring. So if you work with racialized youth between 18 and 30, and if you work at a community-based mentoring program, an employer who offers mentoring opportunities, or a post-secondary institution who has on-campus mentoring opportunities, we'd love to hear from you during a 30 to 60-minute virtual interview. And your insights will be very valuable and help us inform how mentoring programs, policies, and practices can really best contribute to positive outcomes for racialized youth. So if you'd like to participate in that, you can please scan that QR code or send an email to mentoringstudy1 at srdc.org. And if you participate in this interview outside of your normal working hours, there's an honorarium for your participation. So here is my call for everyone to please participate in today's Visiting Expert series. So at this point, I invite everyone to introduce yourself in the chat. So please share your name, your organization, your land, territory acknowledgement, and what you're hoping to learn today from and with Dr. Starlight. And please don't forget to ask your questions in the chat at the bottom of the screen. And as always, today's event will be recorded, and we'll share that recording with everyone after today. So before we begin, Mentor Canada respectfully acknowledges that the lands upon which we operate are the traditional territories of the respective First Nations, Métis Nations, and Inuit, who are the longtime stewards of these lands. And in honor of Mentor Canada's Learn, Listen, and Act for Reconciliation campaign during the month of September, which is, as you likely know, National Truth and Reconciliation Month, I wanted to share what I am personally currently reading and listening to help me learn more about Indigenous histories and experiences in North America. And I invite you all to think about, and please share in the chat as well, what you're currently doing or how you might also learn more about Indigenous youth and their experiences in Canada during National Truth and Reconciliation Month. What is kind of the one small thing that you might commit to, or what book will you read? What podcast will you listen to? You know, what resource will you engage with? And if you're looking for ideas, Mentor Canada has a research report on the mentoring effect for Indigenous youth. And this was from a national research study, and the report offers insights into Indigenous approaches to mentoring, the level of access and impact of mentoring for Indigenous youth, and some of the current barriers to mentoring faced by Indigenous youth in Canada. And you can find that on our website or by scanning the QR code on your screen. Okay, so we have 4 items on our agenda today. I'm going to talk very briefly about Mentor Canada and the Visiting Expert series. I'm then going to turn it over to Teena for her presentation, and then we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end, and some additional resources and tools from Mentor Canada. So if you have questions now for Teena that you'd like her to address at the end, please pose them in the chat. but there will also be an opportunity to just come off mute and pose your question as well. So at Mentor Canada, our mission and vision is to accelerate and scale world-class mentoring in Canada, and we are a national capacity building organization. If you'd like to learn more about us, you can visit mentorcanada.ca. And today's event is presented as part of our quality mentoring system, which is a system of tools and resources that we co-developed in collaboration with leading mentoring researchers and practitioners to help people build new high-quality mentoring programs or enhance the quality of their existing mentoring programs. And all resources are offered in both French and English, and at no cost to nonprofits and charities in Canada. And you can learn more about our quality mentoring system by scanning the QR code or visiting qualitymentoring.ca. And as you can see in the lower left-hand side of your screen, part of the quality mentoring system is a community of practice, which is a national gathering of mentoring professionals to learn about quality mentoring and advanced knowledge and skills, which is what today's event is being offered through. So if you'd like to join our community of practice, it's completely free. You can visit qualitymentoring.ca or scan the QR code. And as a member, you'll be the first to receive all of the updates, resources, and news about events within the community of practice. And so today's Visiting the Expert series is an event, a live event within the community of practice. And it's basically, facilitated live discussions with subject matter experts, such as Dr. Starlight, where the experts create tailored and customized presentations for the community of practice based on our goals and needs. And as a member of the community of practice, you can suggest ideas and experts for us to bring in. So as I mentioned, this is our 4th Visiting Expert series. Our first was with Dr. Bernadette Sanchez, where we learned about cultural humility and anti-racism training. And if you'd like to learn more about that and the implications for mentoring programs, you can scan that QR code or visit our YouTube site. The second Visiting Expert series was with Dr. Michael Karcher, focused on peer mentoring. So really kind of unpacking the evidence-based practices for developing peer mentoring relationships in programs. Again, these are all on our YouTube site if you'd like to watch them back. And then our third Visiting Expert presentation was with Dr. Christian Rummel, which was focused on creating mentoring opportunities and programs for 2S LGBTQIA+ youth. And again, you can find that on our YouTube site if you'd like to watch that. And then finally, that brings us to today's event and today's visiting expert. Dr. Teena Starlight, or her Indigenous name is Strives to Complete Goals Beyond All Barriers Woman, which I absolutely love. And Dr. Starlight is a strong advocate and leading expert on education and mentoring for Indigenous youth. She's an experienced teacher, vice principal, curriculum developer, and professor of Indigenous education. And she's currently the National Director of the Indigenous Youth Mentorship Program. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Teena Starlight. Teena, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can share your screen.
Thank you all for joining. I'm just going to put my screen up here. See if this works. Has it worked?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Okay, good. All right, now I'm just going to press. Mine went black.
Yeah, ours too. It's thinking for a little bit.
Okay, let's try this again. There we go.
There we go. We can see it.
All right. Mizi Ádadadló Ts'ika. I'm from Soutenir Nation. I'm a little bit nervous, but honored to be in this space with all of you. this is basically my lifelong work and what I've learned from Indigenous elders, from Soutenir and from Kainai Nation, or the Blood Tribe. I've engaged with many elders and knowledge keepers and throughout my life, and been an educator. Again, all my work has been with and for children. And so I'm gonna just kind of introduce like some of the work, or it's already been kind of mentioned there, and share what I can with you today in hopes to support whatever work you're doing with Indigenous youth. Okay, I just got to see which, it worked. All right. So one of the questions that was posed was, how is mentoring commonly defined in Indigenous communities? And I had to really think about this, and I know there's a saying that it takes a whole community to raise a child. And so in my own experience, even just listening to traditional ways of mentoring or supporting youth in the community, it goes back to stories that were shared with me from some of the elders. Like one particular from Soutenir, they talked about when they would have ration days when they were younger and they were still in the horse and buggy, and ration day was usually on Thursday, but the community would all come to meet, and they would visit. And so after they picked up their rations, the women would sit on one side and the men would sit on the other side and just speak about whatever and engage and share. And he said, I never knew what they said on the women's side because I was on this side, but all generations were involved. And so people can hear, because again, you want to keep people informed and engaged and how they interpret it from their standpoint of where they are in development. Just kind of like those also Napi stories. Like I've been told different Napi stories, which are Blackfoot stories, throughout my lifetime. And sometimes the same story would reappear or be retold to me, but with a totally different context depending on what I was going through or what I was experiencing at that age of life. So there's always like it's stories you grow up with and then you interpret in, and those are to support you throughout your life at different stages. So they're not just childhood stories. They're guiding stories. Another one that I've come to learn, and when we talk about defining mentoring, is going back to like traditional um, mentoring processes that are still evident within the Blackfoot community. You know, they have their Sundance and they have different societies, and those societies were started from young ages, and you get your children involved in them, and they played a role within the community. And so you're giving children responsibilities and knowledge and a place to help even serve and appreciate your community, right? And the elders and the teachings that are in there, and they're guided through their what they would call like their grandparents or the teachers that have went through their same process of joining the society, and gradually learning and growing through, and so they get that again that multi-generational support. I was thinking of a time when my youngest son, his father had passed away, and he had just become a teenager, and I was really worried about how I could support him in again these new changes of life, and how I was really worried about him, how he would take his father's death. And so it was a family decision to have him join one of the societies so that he would be supported within the community in spaces where I wouldn't be able, or to go beyond what I could provide as a mother, and reach out to the community to support him in his young adulthood. And so again, looking at those what mentoring means from an Indigenous perspective is going back to those traditional teachings and how they apply. Another one too, I really like the story, and I can see and understand it now that I'm a little bit older. One of my elders too, they said when they would have these gatherings, they would have the young men take care of the fire. And the older men would be watching these young men and how they treated and how they nurtured the fire, because to them that was an indication of how they would treat their partners. And so this also was an indication on how they could support these young men in becoming good partners or being good partners. So it's by like observation too. Um, another elder, and I've been told this many times with many elders, when somebody is actually asks questions, that means they're actually ready to learn. You know, most times we just talk at people and then they walk away and say, well, I got this. But if you actually ask questions, that means it triggered something in you that, you know, that into a space of um how it connects with you. And so by asking questions, and if you know me, I ask a lot of questions like all the time to people. Um, and it's just again one of those indicators that people are ready to learn something new if you give them a space to actually ask questions. One of the other like overall kind of teachings I was taught is when we were providing lessons, land-based lessons around TP teachings, um, we were again wanting to, and this is from K4 to adult learning. Um, and we said, okay, here's TP teachings. And some of our spaces at the time were just allowing those TP teachings to happen when you're old enough to, you know, lift the poles and do the manual work. And then the more I was sitting with the elders, and they said, well, actually, no, the way we taught TP teachings were right from when they were young and what they were capable of doing. So you shouldn't be excluding young people from spaces where they could learn. And so they said, for example, when we're doing TP teachings, those young children, even though they can't lift the TP poles, they should be able to touch them so that they start interacting and knowing what it feels like, knowing the smells, knowing the sounds, knowing, you know, they're using all of their senses. And this is as a child. And as they get older, they get a little bit more responsibilities in that particular area to the point where they can independently put up a TP or, you know, without just being the helper. And you know, and I've seen that because my partner, he when I watch him put up a TP, he could do it with two people. And he's done it so much since he was a child. Those teachings are so embedded. He just quietly goes along, and all he has is a string and footsteps, and it's so embedded and it comes so natural. You know, and he leads by example, and people just follow him and say, you know, and so that's the process of Indigenous mentoring, you know, as a young child, and you scaffold your learning as you go. Oops, wrong button. Let's try this one. No, let's try this one. There we go. All right. Why is it important to Indigenous youth? So again, I mentioned that I'm from Tsuut'ina, and Tsuut'ina is one of the nations where our language is in the extinct category, where we have less than 20 fluent speakers. And so there's a real demand to learn and initiative to learn the language and share as much as we can, because even our youngest language speaker is, I believe, 74 years old. And so within the language holds like the songs, the ceremonies, your interpretation, your worldview, you know, and that's really important because that uh, allows people to understand, how am I supposed to be interacting with my environment? You know, Indigenous languages are so descriptive that it will literally tell you how you're supposed to perceive, like even the sun coming up. You know, like in Tsuut'ina, we would say Gujana Gutagoy. In English translation, it would mean good morning. But in Tsuut'ina interpretation, it would be more like, um, how did you say it? Um, you're greeting the sun as it comes up first thing in the morning, you know, and a purposefully, like I said, and so it gives it a different space. Like even the name that I was given, you know, in it's like just Ádadadló Ts'ika. It sounds really short, but when I was asking the elder for the translation, he was saying, well, it means this, but more. And then he'd say, and it means this, but beyond that, and it means this. And so we were sitting there and we were puzzling through, because again, he knows the work I've done. He's watched me grow up. He's watched me and heard about a lot of the trials and tribulations that I've overcome through the family, through the community, through my schooling, through land-based learning. Like he knows all of this. And so that was the best English translation that we could come up with, you know, and I was just like, okay. And so that's why it's important to mentor our youth, because our language and our stories hold such a strong identity for them, for youth. Like even I don't know how many times different elders have told me, you can't know where you're going unless you know where you come from or where you've been. And I was just like, okay. And so I held that in different spaces and in different ways. Like even when we were creating the cultural guidelines, when you're interacting with indigenous Tsuut'ina nation, they said, well, people that come into our nation, they need to understand why we're here and how we got here. They need to understand what's important to us. And they need to understand like the role that Chala, who is the chief, our chief that signed treaty, what role he played at that time and how that still carries us through to today. And I was like, okay. So that again, that importance of having that identity to support youth moving forward. And also, you know, we don't often take the time to listen to young people, you know, and even then to like just recently for myself, like I'd say I've only been effectively been able to engage with adults for maybe the past 10 years if I'm lucky. Before that, I was comfortable speaking to children. Adults was something different, and that was because I didn't know my voice. I didn't know how to use my voice. I didn't know, you know, even if it was strong enough. And then look where I am today. I'm talking to the whole nation, and so it's about nurturing their voice and knowing that you have that backing from your ancestors, your community, you know, your family, is really important. And then the other part is myself growing up. Um, I didn't go to a nation school. All of my education has been within um, Western education systems. I didn't have Indigenous teachers. We had a culture class that was kind of on its own. Any summer programming that came into the community that I was able to go to were like Bible study kind of thing. Like there wasn't any program we did was not Indigenous led with an Indigenous perspective. And so I wanted to be able to create space for Indigenous people to see Indigenous people in these roles. You know, by becoming an Indigenous teacher. Like I never had an Indigenous teacher. I wanted to be an Indigenous teacher, you know. Um, but we need to see, Indigenous people need to see ourselves in these roles. Um, the other one is again how we talked about that connection to land. I think when I started understanding more about my responsibility as a educator and as a mentor and as a community member, it also I also became more responsible for the land, because those teachings with the elders, with the language and our stories, they all happened on the land and they come from the land. And so the importance of connecting people to nature, like to the lands they come from, to their language, because our language is developed from the land. And again, to our ancestors or the cosmos or even the supernatural, there's a real strong sense of identity and connection that could is important to young people. you know, like I said, I didn't understand that connection till I was older. But if I was nurtured younger, you know, I'm sure that maybe I could have even overcome some of the struggles that I have gone through, just having a different understanding or connection with my community or people or the language, or mentors, like again, Indigenous mentors. Um, and then I'm what, 52 years old, and in the past, I'd say 2 years are just finally in a place where I can actually learning to live. I think the majority of my life was I was in survival mode, you know, being a young mother, being a young, you know, trying to balance young children and school and work and, you know, really just surviving. Now all of my children are all adults, and I actually can live now and breathe and enjoy going out on the land and enjoy going to a powwow, enjoy just sitting and beating without having to rush to hockey and cook and do all the other kind of things. So, you know, creating a space where people could enjoy life and learn to live and not always have to be in that survival mode. So currently one of the I took a long, like I said, my background is in education. I kind of took a long way and ended up here. So I am the national director for the Indigenous Youth Program. And this is a space, a unique space that connected all of, I guess, my own values together with the values that I've obtained being an educator and ways to give back to my community and give back to the youth, and use all the skills that I've kind of learned into a space that is still meaningful and stretches honestly beyond my community and beyond like um, like a school. And now again, like I said, it's national and it's it feels really good. So this is a link here. It's supposed to be, but just if you wanted to know more information, the link is iymp.ca, and they'll give you more information about the program itself. What I'm going to share with you, though, is what brought me to and what connected me to the Indigenous Youth Mentorship Program. So the Indigenous Youth Mentorship Program is based on Indigenous theoretical frameworks. And those frameworks, within my studies and with my lived experiences and with my connections with elders and community, have really come out and say, oh, I understand this. I connect with this. I get this part. Um, so first of all, the inner circle is actually the 4 R's from Dr. Verna Kirkness. And so those are respect, which again, our elders definitely understand. So even when I was working with the elders in that those guidelines and even that cultural calendar that we created, respect kept coming up. And so finally I asked them, so, well, what does respect mean to you? And every elder, again, had a deeper meaning of respect. You know, they said it was respect for your immediate family. It was a respect for your community. It was respect for your home. It was respect for like the air you breathe, the water you drink, the land that you're on, respect for your community, respect for your siblings. Like it was so much. And I was just like, okay, I understand that, and the role that it plays beyond yourself and how it ripples out into, you know, everything that you do and engage in. The other one is relevance. And this is something that, again, that truth and reconciliation is a part of, but again, in my educational experience is being relevant to the area and the people that you're working with. You know, as an educator in Alberta, you know, there's and I'm sure because it's really famous now, you know, the 7 sacred teachings, and they have really good value, and even the medicine wheel, you know, and coming to know where those actually come from and who they were created by. Because growing up, we didn't have them numbered and labeled as 7 sacred teachings, or we didn't have the medicine wheel, but that's because of the area that I'm from. And so now we have lots of people saying, well, this is what Indigenous people live, because they're putting us all in this like melting pot. And it does a disservice to the people, and sometimes can offend the people that you're directly working with. And so working with the elders, they were even in my community, within the Blackfoot community and Soutenir community, they were telling me, well, we don't do these, and so if I'm working with them, I have to be mindful of that, of what is relevant for the community that I'm working with. Just like even learning, like I haven't went northern Alberta into more of the Dene communities. And even when I was working or hearing from people that worked in those areas, they said, we don't offer tobacco because tobacco doesn't even grow in our area. Like that's not a natural resource. We offer tea. And I was like, okay. So again, that's being relevant, understanding that the community itself and what's of value to them. Um, and again, moving to the responsibility, like how are we both responsible for being allies, and how like learning, like I said, these different ways that I've come to know, I feel that I am responsible for sharing what I have known, and also to help clear some of those pathways or build some of those bridges or fill in some of those gaps, just because that those are meaningful spaces for our youth, for our elders, for allyship, and then reciprocity. So reciprocity is a two-way relationship, where you're also giving back, right? You're not just taking. And I've learned that in so many different ways. Like when we go back to the respect piece and saying, oh, we're going to go on the land. Well, how do we give back to the land for what it's giving to us? And those are some of the ways. So those were some of those protocols kind of go in, and how, again, those Indigenous frameworks give the space for this type of learning to happen, right? Within mentoring. Like this is what we do when we do our mentor training, is acknowledging those spaces where Indigenous learning can happen and manifest within the community. And so when the next circle is the circle of courage, and again, belonging, the sense of belonging. I struggled myself through my own experiences, you know, even trying to belong to Tsudina. My mother is Tsudina, my father is Cree, and because they legally got married, I technically wasn't from Tsudina. And even though I was born and raised there, and then I married into a Blackfoot community, so I wasn't technically Blackfoot either, and yet I was teaching the children. I was right in the community. And then when my mother passed away, she wanted me to come home, and so I went through the process of becoming an official Tsudina member. And by doing that, I had to take a test on the knowledge that I hold of Tsodina. Like I had to know my family lineage. I had to know, I had to do a language test. I had to do a culture test to prove that I was Tsodina. And then I had to get voted in by the membership. And even though I was born and raised. And so that sense of belonging, I know how important it was for me to create a space for my children and for children that I worked with in schools, to make them feel belonged, like they belonged in the school, belonged in my classroom, belonged in their, whatever we are engaging in. Because if they don't, they're hurt, and we don't want to contribute to that. We're trying to heal and mend, and so you that sense of belonging, I can really resonate of how that plays out in different spaces. And then mastery. So we go back to those traditional teachings of, um, you know, because your community members are watching over you and guiding you, they also would know what your skills are and how to apply them and when to apply them. And so they would guide you to different areas. Like this is why we had different spiritual leaders and different political leaders and different, like the craft or different hunters, you know, we had different skills, and you would be guided to the spaces where your skills are your strengths, and guided into those spaces where it would benefit, again, back to the community and your family, you know. So mastery is about learning, taking the skills from the people in it and enhancing it. Independence, this is your guidance so that, again, if I was to do this talk 10 years ago, I don't think I would have. Um, but with the guidance that I've and experiences that I have and the encouragement that I have, I'm able to do some things independently now, you know, including like a lot of the crafts and stuff that I've been doing, a lot of the teachings and gifts that I was giving, I'm able to do those independently, you know, and that's how I contribute back to my community and my family. And then going back to, again, that sense of generosity, that again, how do we give back? How do we share these with our community? And so this is why I connected with the Indigenous Youth Mentorship Program, is I held those same values. And our mentors, it's about how do we support them? How do we guide them? How do we nurture them? And how do we make use of what we've done with them? You know, like high school, they cut you off and that's it. You're an adult, 18, you know, at 18, you're technically an adult and you're able to deal with life situations. But as a parent, I also recognize that my adult children needed way more support as adults than they ever did as children. And so I'm still engaging with um, some of my elders or older people that, you know, how do I support my adult children? You know, so again, it's you mentor, it's a lifelong mentoring. It's not just, you know, when you're 18, you're done. Um, and then again, those hierarchy needs of that are from Maslow. Maslow actually worked with Blackfoot people from Siksika when he was creating that hierarchy of needs. And so those are based again on Indigenous frameworks, which is why they're in this circle as well. So talking about the Indigenous Youth Mentorship Program, there has been studies and how it was created. So the program itself is 21 years old now, started in the city of Winnipeg, has grown through because there was a need for to have Indigenous youth actually giving back in different ways and how they wanted to give back, and that was through a mentoring program. So it spread through researchers from there to northern Manitoba and made its way to like Ganawagi, Wickwemikwan, in Saskatchewan, there was a few communities, and then to Alberta, and then made its way to and through those researching and through the experiences that they had with those Indigenous communities, that's where the essential conditions came. I left at the bottom here, where the paper came from. And Kate's story is still a big part, our connection to IYMP currently. And so I was reading through all of these essential conditions that she uh, did research about, and like and engaging with Indigenous communities. And again, it still really made sense. So we use this as like a connecting point with communities in our engagement. We work through the essential conditions to prepare them for readiness for the Indigenous Youth Mentorship Program. So again, making sure that it's youth-led, making sure that we have high school students leading the program. That we have school community specific autonomy, meaning that again, you're doing that relevance piece. Like this is what the program is. We are understanding what the community has to offer and how they want to hold the program. And so we're giving the program to them so that it becomes their program, and they're working it within the safe means of how they interpret that, and how they can, and you know, that we've got good support from that, because we're not telling you this is what you have to have. We're just saying here's a program that could help, and they said yes, we can do this. We have our own knowledge keepers, we have our own elders, we have our own community members, and that's what it means to have community autonomy. Um, Demonstrated leadership, administrative leadership. I recognize this definitely as when I was an educator. if you didn't have it, especially when we're working with curriculum development and land-based learning, if you did not have your superintendent on board and your principals on board and your teachers on board, it wasn't going to go anywhere. And so that administrative leadership, you do need community support for programs to work. And so this is that relationship building piece as well, where you're connecting with communities and having that community support. Like, yes, as a community, we value this and we want to be part of this. And that's what it means by that administrative support. And then higher level support, sometimes that means like for funding to support. Sometimes that means even getting chief and council support. It just means getting the other support that's needed to make this happen. Dedicated champions. So people that are dedicated to run the program. What we call the program leaders or the classroom or the community champions. The ones that are saying, yes, we connect with this. Yes, we understand this. Yes, we're willing to work with you. Like I said, if you don't have, say you have this really good plan and you don't have somebody that can deliver, it's still not going to go anywhere. But having somebody dedicated, and this is where I really appreciate IYMP because they invest in those community champions and those program leaders. And that's where all our investment is. And again, community support. So community support is recognizing and connecting like health centers that are within the community and other services that are already in the community. And how can we network and connect with each other to support the same community? That's what community support means. And same thing, having knowledge keepers or elders that can come in and support that work. Quality and use of evidence. And that one again is when we're using this, how are we effectively using the feedback that we're given as well? And how do we support that feedback? For example, this is like that continued relationship building. People shift, ideas shift, and so how do you gain that feedback and help support giving that feedback? And that's that part. And then again, those learning opportunities. Like this is one of those learning opportunities. How can we learn from each other? How can we guide them to different learning opportunities that would support the growth or nurturing of high school students, like other training, that or leadership training, or other possibilities to learn from one another. Like when we do our high school mentor training, we try to bring as many communities together so they can learn and network with each other. And most importantly, rooted in relationships, and nurturing those relationships. And not just, come in, we got a program and then jump out. And, this is really about how do we stay connected with one another? I had I had an elder call me this morning. It was really cute because she's going to help us with a summit that we're doing on October 18th. And she's going to be our keynote speaker. And she phoned me frantically this morning because she thought it was today. And she was saying, I'm so sorry. And I told her, no, we got some time. And so like being connected, this same elder, I found her really cute too, because Calgary has been on a water restriction because they had these water main breaks. This was way back in like June. And when it first happened, she called me and she said, and she was worried about me if I was going to have enough water. And she said, there's lots of water in Red Deer. We got those big bottles you can, and that's about building relationships where you start caring for one another, in a deeper sense, and just offering supports in different ways. And so then we get to the contextual conditions, and those ones are more so of the time, funding, and readiness. I know I'm running out of time here, so I'm just going to go through these. Relationships for Indigenous youth. Again, we do the train the trainer model, or again, that, learn as you're going, lead by example. that group mentoring we talked about, giving children a chance to just play, and engage with one another, creating the spaces to make mistakes and ask questions. And again, most importantly, is learn to listen. I was going to talk about my dissertation. This was what it was on as an educator, because I was trying to, again, have Ts'una ways of knowing just as equal as Western curriculum, because this is where I'm grounded and where I can better give back to my community and students. And so what my key findings are, again, creating a community, a sense of community, experiential learning. And I could give all kinds of examples that connect us to the land, learning to care, in different ways. Like I said, that nurturing that fire, like taking care of elders. We used to have different traditional roads where there were even assigned elderly people to take care of, and then that spiritual guidance. Again, when our youth are struggling, or even myself, where do we go? How do we do this? A lot of our Indigenous schools have Indigenous prayers, but nobody ever teaches. They teach us, we say it every morning, but nobody ever teaches us. And if this situation happens, this is how you can use that prayer outside of the classroom. How do I make it to practical to my life? And so overall, with the work that I've done throughout my life, throughout my educational journey, and with the work with IYMP and just being a community member, it's about relationship building, creating that time and space for relationships to happen and to be nurtured, learning to listen, involving elders because they hold those knowledge and stories. They can also um, create the space that is needed for other connections to be made that's beyond kind of our control, like those spiritual connections, or give it to, like you said, you give it to the universe. That's their role, and that's why you involve them. And again, be on the land and invest in the community. Oh, I think that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Teena, for that great presentation. If anyone has questions, you can either post them in the chat, or we're a relatively smaller group. You can just feel free to come off mute and pose your questions. We have about 10 minutes, so. Maybe selfishly, I'll ask a question, Teena. So I have a few questions for you. My first is, are there any resources out there that you think are really helpful for people to learn about Indigenous cultures and histories? It's National Truth and Reconciliation Month. Are there anything that you would suggest people read, watch, listen to that might help them, advance their knowledge of Indigenous histories?
I know one that I've taken recently is that 4 Seasons of Reconciliation. It's online, like it's actually an online course. Our work, or Ever Active Schools, actually, got a lot of our staff to do that, to take that. I appreciated it because, again, I know about Indigenous people in my area, but this particular resource helps you to understand Indigenous people across Canada in different perspectives and different ways. I really appreciated that one. Another one that where I've been involved with is that blanket exercise. If you haven't participated in it, it's I facilitate that a with Val from Soutenir and an elder from Soutenir, and one of the, I guess one of the people that we participants one time told us that was such meaningful experience, and how it gave the history of Indigenous people over the past 300 years in 30 minutes. And, again, it was a space to ask questions. It was just a space to be uncertain. a space to become responsible to what truth and reconciliation really is and what allyship means. So that was another one too.
Tina, I'm not familiar with the blanket exercise. Could you just explain it really briefly?
So it originated from Kairos, Canada. And they have two versions. One is for high school students and one is for adults. And it's a exercise, like a physical exercise that most people again kind of resonate with because you're asking them to move through the history of um, Indigenous people and what they went through historically since contact,
Hmm.
and then bringing us back to today, and it celebrates too some of the wins that Indigenous people had in making space for reconciliation. But this is like a resource from Indigenous perspectives across Canada.
Okay, wonderful. Um, I see Alicia has her hand up. Go ahead, Alicia. Oh, we can't. Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're a little quiet.
That's probably why.
There you go.
Thanks, everyone. Tina, I had a question for you. You mentioned earlier in presentation that in terms of what mentoring means for Indigenous youth, you noted that to learn to not just survive, but to live, and I really resonated with that. And I was just curious if you can give a few examples of what that looks like in the Indigenous Youth Mentorship Program.
Well, you know what one of the strengths of the program is you get to play. And so when I first actually attended an IYMP gathering with the high school mentors, we had so many youth that came in and their hoods were up, their guards were up, nobody would really share or talk, and I was thinking, this is a tough crowd. And I was watching how people engage, and all of a sudden they started playing games, and kids like to play, and they were playing, and the more they played, like this was over 2 days, all of a sudden they wanted to, the sessions were over and they still wanted to play, and they wanted to engage with people, and they were playing and they were laughing, and so we played some more, and in the background we were teaching, but they kept playing, and you could just hear the laughter, and all of a sudden this brightness, and this is what I fed off of, like this. And so I wanted to kind of keep creating those opportunities like that, is because when we did our closing circle, everybody had their hoods off, and everybody but one person spoke. And so, and this was within 2 days, with that again, that power of play, or just so they didn't have to think about anything else, whatever was going on in their lives, whatever was going on at home, whatever was going on in school, the responsibilities they had. Some of them have to take care of their younger siblings, some don't, they don't have the most safest places to go back, or even those family connections, but they just played, and through that they were just able to live.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alicia. Tina, we have two questions in the chat. The first was from Andrea, and she was wondering about the study/publication that you mentioned at the end and how she could read and access it. I think that's your dissertation, correct?
The one was on the essential conditions.
And then the second one was about community is identity. At the very end there, I think is what she was mentioning. Experiential learning connects us to the land. Learning to care creates responsibility.
Oh, that's my dissertation.
Yeah, I think she wants to read your dissertation.
Okay, I could send you the link. I could have put it, I didn't put it in the PowerPoint. But yeah, it is online. I think if you Google my name, it actually comes up.
If you send it to me, Tina, I can send it to everyone who registered, and we can get that to everyone. Yeah. And then the second question is from Cole, and he is wondering, so he says, thank you, Dr. Starlight. Ultimately, it comes down to relationship building and networking. But I'm wondering, do you have any specific resources or recommendations, like websites, databases, organizations, etc., on how to find Indigenous mentors for mentorship programs?
So that networking piece, again, we have our website, iyimp.ca, and Sarah, who happens to be online, we've been working with Alberta Mentoring Program again, and their website also has supports from Alberta Resources and Indigenous partners. On our website too, because it's national, we have got some support from other nations across Canada. Those are like the easy finds. And then again, Ben is a really good connector for those Indigenous communities across the national space too.
Awesome. Thanks, Teena. And I see Leroy has his hand up.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Starlight, for your presentation. That was very useful. My work involved a collaboration many years ago with some Black mentors with Indigenous as well, University of Toronto, and this was a mentorship program. However, I could not continue my work with Indigenous, not that I could not, but I don't think I was qualified to do that. I think there's so much that can be learned by collaborative work with Indigenous and Black students. Have you known of any such work going on? And certainly it's something because of going through that journey together, kind of thing would be a lot to learn and very useful. What thoughts do you have, and do you have any, have you done any of that kind of work?
I haven't done that particular work, but I have I do work with Calgary Catholic Immigration Society that has a lot of newcomers to Canada. And again, a lot of newcomers don't necessarily get that voice from Indigenous people or even learn about Indigenous people. So we've been working on creating spaces for that to happen. And also in doing that, I've come to understand too that a lot of the newcomers that come to Canada share similar experiences, similar traumas. There's a disconnect because they've moved from their homelands and their language to Canada. So it's a newer space for me, but knowing that there's an importance there of how people, again, it's that sense of belonging, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we could talk offline as to how this could move forward, because there's so much that can be learned and share in terms of a common journey.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leroy. Okay, everyone, I'm gonna have to end us there just for time's sake. Teena, can I put your email in the chat for everyone?
Yes.
Just in case they have questions? Okay. So there's Teena's email. Please reach out to her if you have any questions after today. And Teena, thank you once again for this wonderful and valuable presentation. This was very enlightening, and I learned a lot. I have a full page of notes, as I'm sure others do as well. So thank you again. This was truly, truly wonderful.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for coming.